Welcome back to the SSAS training sessions. In last session, we discussed about how to work with many-to-many relationships, and we also discussed about different types of dimensions in SSAS. In this session, let's start with the translations. So we're going to discuss about translations, perspectives, and a little bit about the calculations. Before going to the translations, I would like to show how we can connect to analysis service database from Excel. So which is very important because users likes to test their cubes from Excel, and you have to make sure that the connectivity from Excel is always good to the analysis service database. So for example, this is your underlying database on which you built an SSAS application. This is your SSAS project. When you deploy it, it deploys the analysis services database in DB, analysis services database in on analysis server. So once it is deployed, then users will use Excel to make a connection to the database and read the data in the Excel, and they'll see the charts and all, pivot tables and all in the Excel. So they'll have to see the data in the Excel. Now we're gonna see how to make this connection and how to test. Even you can use Excel to test your database, whether the data is coming correctly or not, whether the structure you have defined is loading the data properly from the database or not. So to connect from Excel, first let me open Excel sheet. Okay, and I'm taking blank workbook, and once you open it, you can see a tab called data. So from that, go to the from other databases, and you can see from analysis services. So here you need to give the server name. In my case, it is localhost. Okay, click on next, and here you need to select the database from where you have to pull the cubes. Before that, let me do one thing quickly. I've not deployed the cube, so let me deploy the cube before we start working with Excel. So let me quickly deploy and process, or at least deploy it. Okay, let me process it. It's not gonna take much time. Okay, now let me go back and let me use the same option from other sources, from analysis services, localhost, and let me select the database from here, and you can see AdventureWorks GW and role playing dimensions and some other stuff is here. So once I select AdventureWorks GW, click on next. I need to select the cube that I'm interested in, or the cube to which I want to make connection from Excel. So once it is done, click on finish, and it will say pivot table report or pivot chart or only create connection. So what you want to take, if you select pivot chart, it will open the chart box where you can drag and drop to create charts, and pivot table is for table format report, like pivot table report, where you will have columns, rows, filters and measures. So let me go with pivot table for now. If I click on OK, you can see on the right hand side it's showing us pivot table fields, nothing but the measures and the attributes information from the cube which you have connected. And on the left hand side, this is the pivot table, and if you click anywhere in the empty area, then the pivot table fields list will be hidden. And if you want to see it again, just click here, which will enable the pivot table fields. Now if you observe here, you have four drop boxes or text boxes kind of thing. One is filters, another one is columns, third one is rows, and fourth one is values. If you select any metric information like sales amount, it will go into the values, and you can see the sales amount is calculated in the pivot table and the data has been retrieved. And tax amount I selected these two, and now from the customer or from the product I'm selecting color. So when you select any attribute, it will by default go into the rows. So this is the dimension information will be into rows and metric information will be into values. And the chart on the pivot table on the left hand side, you can see it's displaying color wise sales amount and tax amount. And let me select product name too. Now it's showing color wise, product wise, sales amount and tax amount. You can expand and collapse. So we call this format as drill down report. So where you can collapse and expand the data at a particular level. This is how you can use, and there is an option called columns. If you see here in the columns, it is showing values by default. That means the sales amount and the tax amount. The values is nothing but this section, right? uh, if you see, by default all the measures will go here if you select a measure, and these values is nothing but it is showing in columns, right? This is what it means. Now let me drag something else onto the columns. For example, let me drag color into the columns. Now for every value, let's say for sales amount, all the color information will be shown, and for tax amount all the color information. And if you want color information on top and sales amount and tax amount on the bottom, that means for every color, sales amount and tax amount, you just need to simply drag and drop this one from here to here, or drag this one down. Now we can see the colors are coming on top and the tax amount and the sales amount are coming in the bottom in the column section. Now there is one more section here available, that is filter section. Let me take category into the filters. So when I drag category into the filters, you can see the filter is displaying on top. So you can go, you can select one filter. For example, I'm selecting accessories. If I select this, then the data will be filtered only for accessories. And if I select something else, bikes, it will give me bikes category related color information, product information, and its sales amount and the tax amount. And if you want to select multiple values, you need to check this box. You can select multiple values like this. Now it will give me accessories, colors, and I'm sorry, bikes and clothing related category information. Okay, so this is how you can make use of Excel, and there are a couple of properties, pivot table options, where you can hide the subtotals. If you see totals and filters, you can show grand totals for columns. You can hide it. You can hide it for rows. Grand totals, I mean. If you see here, now the grand totals has been removed from here. And let me check that grand totals again. Click on OK, and you can see the grand totals of for the columns and the rows will be shown at the end of the report, end of the columns and end of the rows. So these are some of the important properties, and this is how you can connect from Excel workbook to analysis services database to analyze the data in the analysis service database. And whenever you make any change, selection change here, like selecting a column or selecting a filter, for example, um, instead of English product name, I like to see product category. So I'm taking this one out. Now when I made a change in the pivot table selections, right? Field selection. Now it will create an MDX and it will trigger the server, the MDX, and it will get the data and it will display the data here. And if I select product subcategory here, now this is one more MDX. The MDX will be sent to the server and execute it and get the data and display the data in the Excel workbook. So for everything, the MDX will be created and it will be triggered on the server, and it fetches the data and displays in the workbook. So this is about connecting to the analysis service database from Excel workbook. Now let's go back to the cube and let's discuss about what translations. Translations are very helpful when you're working on multilingual projects, like a project which is meant uh, for different users across the globe. Let's say I have users in 3 different countries. USA, Russia, and China. If I have users like this, then most of the Russian users don't know English, and the same is the case with China. So in that case, you need to provide the information in their own language, in their native language. So these translations will help us in achieving the particular goal. And it's more like a multi-language support. If you're designing a queue, for example, here, AdventureWorks DW, the Russian users can't read English, so they can't understand what's there in the queue. So if you can provide the same information in their native language, that will be very helpful to a lot of users. So we can increase the user base, right, if you have a multi-language support. So these translations will help in achieving the multilingual support. So to do the same, what you need to do is you need to click on new translation, and you need to select the language for which you are planning to create a translation. So in this case, let me go with the Russian language. Okay, I selected Russia, click on OK, and once I did that, I can see a text box here where you can enter the Russian word for AdventureWorks DW. Earlier, the case was different. Like back in 2005 to 2006, we were supposed to send each and every name. For example, AdventureWorks DW is the cube name, and Fact Internet Sales is the measure group name, and sales amount is one measure name, and tax amount is another measure name. So we used to capture all the information, all the different measures names, measure group names, and cube names, and dimension names, and attribute names in an Excel sheet, and we normally share it with the users. Users will give the appropriate Russian name or Chinese name, depends on the user. Let's say Russian name is this one for AdventureWorks, and this is like this. So they will enter the appropriate name, and they'll send us back the Excel worksheet. So what we need to do is, in that case, just simply copy that next to AdventureWorks DW, and copy this next to Fact Internet Sales. And similarly for sales amount, tax amount, Fact Internet Sales, reason, and everything. Okay, so it was like this before. Now people are saying, why don't you use Google Translate to translate the words into Russian language or Chinese language or French language there. And if you don't find any particular word, then ping us. We will provide the uh, appropriate Russian name or Chinese name for the word that you can't find in Google Translate. So let me show you how we can do that. I'm gonna do it for Russian language, right? So first, I'm doing it with the help of Google Translate. If I give this, it is detecting the language, and I want it in Russian language. Okay, there is no name for this one in Russian language, it seems. So let's take some other language, which is, I mean, basically translation you can achieve for anything, but Russian language you may get words or you may not get words for few of these columns. So let me take Telugu language. Even if it is not there, I can give the language. I mean, I can give the word because I know Telugu. Okay, let me select in Telugu. So this is the Telugu word for, oops. Okay, this is the Telugu word for AdventureWorks DW. What I need to do is I just need to copy and paste the same. And similarly, you have to do for every name of the object. So this is Fact Internet Sales. I'll paste it here. Similarly, I have to do it for all the remaining object names here. So let me do one thing. Let me do it offline. So finally, I enter the translation words for each and every name in the in the cube that I have designed, like dimension name, measure group name, and the cube name. So these are the names in Telugu. Now what you need to do is you just need to deploy it, and let's deploy it and see what happens and how we can test out these translations. So to deploy it, either you can directly go on deploy by right clicking on it and click on deploy, or I prefer to click on process. So what it will do is first it will build and then it will deploy. Now you can see it is deploying. Once deployed, completed successfully, then it will ask for process. I just cancel or close the process. So if you make any change to the translations, you don't need to process. That is one advantage. And now let me go to the browser. And how can I test these translations? So to test these translations, let me reconnect. I can't see anything in Telugu. So because the language is selected as default. So the default language, if you go to the default language, here is the default language. The default language is nothing but the language that is selected in the system where the project is designed or started up. So my system is selected with English US as default language. That is why English is the default here. And now I need to select Telugu as the default as the language to test out the translations, because I created translations in Telugu. If you see, here it is. I selected Telugu and you can see the names are coming up in Telugu. Sahasa DW works, and under measures you have fact internet sales as Nijanik internet sales. Nijanik Punar Vikreta sales. It's too tough than English, man. And once you expand, it is freight, it is అమ్మకాల మొత్తము, that is sales amount and the tax amount. And this is fine. Now if I go to the dimension, let's say I'm going to product dimension. I think product means it's utpatti. So if I click on this, still the names of the attributes are showing in English. So the translations for the names of the attributes needs to be done in the dimension, needs to be done at the dimension level. So if you go to the dimension, this is my dimension product, and you can see a tab called translations here. If you select the translations tab, it's the same structure. Like if you click on this and you need to select Telugu, and one translation will be added, and product already the dimension name translation is given at the cube level. That will be taken, not this one, so you can ignore this. Let me go ahead with these 4 attributes very quickly. Product key, utpatti key, and English product name, color, product subcategory key. Oops. So utpatti upavibhagamu key. Now I have added everything, and let me deploy it. Okay, let me go to the queue first, and let me refresh it. Oops. Oh, I deployed the, I made changes to the dimension, so I need to process it. Okay, let me reconnect it now. And if you see here, the language is selected to Telugu and everything is in Telugu. And if I go to Utpatti, and even the attribute names are showing in Telugu. So this is how you can create a translation for one language. Like that, it depends on the user's requirement. If you have users like in 10 different countries where English is not the major language, or most of the users are not good in English, then you need to create a translation for them. But this is only one side of the coin. What users can see is the attribute names and the measure names and the cube name in their own language, their native language. But what about the data? If I drag and drop this rangu, that means color, it will show the colors in English only, right? So in that case, what people will do is they'll have an extra column. Okay, they'll have an extra column to have the data in Telugu. For example, color, blue, black, everything will be in Telugu. Just like if you see, if you go to the data source view, and if you see the product table, and if you try to see the data, here you can see English product name and Spanish product name. That means the data is in Spanish. And similarly, you can see French product name where the data is in French. So similarly, if you want to if you have a lot of user base in Andhra Pradesh in India, then they'll maintain the data in Telugu. So what people will do is they'll give that attribute which has Telugu names to the users in India. So that is how you can, but that is a huge time taking. And that you need to spend a lot of time to move the data into the respective native languages. If you want to maintain 10 to 15 translations, and if you want to maintain the data in those 10 to 15 different languages, then it's really a tough job to do. Something like this. If you see here, the sample, the product name is in English, Spanish, and French. So this is about the translations. Translations helps in achieving multi-language projects, and it provides multilingual support. Now let's go to the next tab, that is perspectives. Perspectives, it's more like creating a view of the cube. Let's say this is your cube. I don't know how to draw this. I'm just giving a pictorial representation of the cube. And perspectives, basically it will create a view of this, like this slice to the one set of users and this slice to one set of users. You are gonna filter out the attributes and the measures that are gonna visible to the end users. But this is not like restricting users from seeing the remaining attributes. It's like an extra view kind of, where users will be seeing their seeing the attributes and measures that they are interested in. For example, let's say this is the all the dimensions and attributes and measure groups that are available in the cube, and few users want to see only product wise sales, few users want to see customer wise sales. So we can't put the restriction from seeing the remaining attributes, but we can filter out, okay, if you use this perspective you can see only this set of data. Let's see an example. So for creating the perspective, you need to click on the new perspective option here, the button on top. And once you click, then it will show the check boxes. That's it. And you need to give a name for this, user one. And what you need to do here is, let's say this user is interested in only reseller sales. You don't want to see uh, internet sales information. And this particular user don't want to see internet sales reason also, only internet sales, that is free amount. And user is interested in product and is not interested in customer, is not interested in subcategory, category, sales data and sales reason. Now under the product dimension, user want to see only English product name and color, because product key and English product subcategory does not make much meaning to the users. Now I created a perspective. In this perspective, the user who connected to this perspective can see only free amount and product, like in the product dimension only English product name and color. Now let me select one more with the name user 2, who is much interested in internet sales but not in reseller sales, and who is not interested in product, not in customer. Yeah, let's say product from English product name, and from the subcategory they are interested in English subcategory name only. And let's go to the next dimension, that is product category. From product category they want to see only product category name. They don't want to see the key columns and all, and they're not interested in sales data and sales result. Now I created two perspectives. It's more like a view on top of the cube, or a slice of the cube, right? And if I deploy it, again you don't need to process the whole cube, you just need to deploy it. Let me deploy the cube first. Now users who connected to the user one perspective can see only these selected objects. Similarly, the users who connected to the users two perspective can see only those are selected objects. Now let me click on reconnect, and here you can see there is a button. which is an option to select the cube that you are interested in. And this is one cube, and this is role playing dimension sample cube, the next cube. Along with the cubes, you can also see the perspectives here. So if I select user 1, you can see only product. Let me change the language to default because it's difficult to understand. So you can see only product and the two color and the English product name from the products, and measures. And the measures we have only frame. This is what we have selected in the perspective, right? And if I go to the user 2, only the selected items will be shown, like these measures, sales amount and tax amount. And from product we selected only product name, and from category we selected only category name. And it's more like hiding the unwanted attributes from the users. Let's say that doesn't mean that user can't query the whole cube. They can query the whole cube. You are not setting security here, but you are giving a slice of it. Let's say a tester want to test a particular functionality, and and your database has hundreds of dimensions, attributes, and hundreds of measures. They'll ask you, they'll request you, why don't you create a perspective with only these two attributes and those three dimension, those three measures. Then we can create a perspective to the testers. They can test it out, even to the users who don't want to scroll down and scroll up and scroll down. Imagine you have thousands of measures. Then you'll take a lot, it will take a lot of time to scroll up and scroll down to find out where is your attribute or the measure that you are interested in. So instead, if you create a perspective for users, they can select to they can connect to the perspective and they can query it easily. The selection will be pretty easy. Let me show you an example. I'm going back to data from other sources, from analysis services, and I'm giving dot, that means localhost. And here, when I select the database, you can see along with the cubes, you can also see the perspectives. And far most right, you can see the type as perspective. And let me select users 2 or user 1 perspective. Click on next, finish, and I'll go with the pivot table. You can see it's pretty simple now. It's pretty easy for the users to find out. You don't need to scroll up and scroll down. And if a set of user is interested in only product wise sales information, we can create one perspective for them. And the main advantage is you just need to deploy it. You don't need to process the cube. If you don't need to process the cube, just create a perspective, deploy it, and tell the user, okay, now connect to the perspective name XYZ. Similarly, a new user come back and ask for a perspective or filter the attributes and the measures, and once he provide his interested attributes and measures, we can create perspective, deploy it, and we can ask users to play with that. Click here, color, and English product name. That's it. It will be easy for the end users to play with the data. So mainly, it is like a slice of the cube. You are providing only a slice of the cube. That doesn't mean user can't connect to English category name or English subcategory name and so on. They can connect. The only thing is they need to connect to the different cube. This is not gonna provide security to you. This is just uh, more like user friendliness, giving a less number of attributes or less number of measures to the end user, and which will be easy for him to access the cube data. If you see here, you can connect to this, you can connect to this, right? If you set this, click on next, finish. But for security and all, we have a different option called roles. When we discuss about the roles, you will understand the security. But perspective is more like a user-friendly option to limit the number of attributes and measures. So this is about perspectives, and I'm going to put an end to this session here. We'll be discussing about partitions and aggregations along with storage modes in the next session. Thank you very much, guys.